Now, you're in a universe which has an apparent reality to you, and no matter how it got here or you got in it, here you are. This is it. And the universe you're in really is a series of events. You are an event in an event sequence. Everything that is begins, grows, dies, and fades away. Everything in the whole universe does that. The hills, the planets, the suns, everything begins, expands, exhibits itself, dies, and fades away. So there are constant events occurring. Now, the universe is made up of a set of media that we differentiate, because part of being in the universe is that you can discriminate. And you can discriminate between various classes of material, and different cultures discriminate differently. So, if you're Western, you have 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. If you're Eastern, you have 5: earth, air, fire, water, and wood. Because the Westerners don't have any sense of the organic. And maybe, some other groups have different sets of elements. All these things are media. They are not necessarily pure, in their own right. It's very difficult to get pure fire or pure wood or pure water or pure anything. Earth, of course, is not pure any more than most rocks are pure. They are admixtures of minerals. And water is as different one from the other as glass. There is no such thing as glass. Glass is a whole set of very different minerals. So, I speak here as a glass blower. Potter would be the same. So, we're surrounded by media. That you can differentiate between the media, and that many other things obviously do so, is obvious to you. Right. Now, within the media, there are differences. And you can start to list them for yourself. Again, you need to be able to discriminate between warmer and cooler, as between air masses or water bodies, between more or less concentrate, which you might do by taste through salt and fresh water. And so because there are differences within the media, there are surfaces separating those differences. So in air, there are surfaces separating air more or less charged with moisture and in a state of condensation, which you see as clouds, or not. And there's a surface between those formed in air. In every case, on every one of those surfaces, there is some tension, because warmer is always trying to invade cooler, and saltier always trying to cross to fresher. So there's tremendous pressure across the media. Media always trying to get more like each other. Now, often this is achieved as between air and water, the sea and the atmosphere, by a slow diffusion of water into the atmosphere across a gigantic surface. However, if that is not possible, there may be an explosive release at a single point, which is probably how this universe itself originated, a singularity through which, from some other media, this universe then appeared. Or if a seed now settles on a surface which represents a tree seed, settles between air and earth, it explodes into a tree. There is a detonation of life, and what the tree does is bring minerals and water from the earth and give it to the air, and brings light from the air and sugars and give it to the earth. So the event is a translator between two forms of media or two conditions within a medium. Everything you see then is a release of tension between media. So every event occurs at an interface of media. And an explosion and a tree are precisely the same thing. One a little slower than the other and organic, and the other a little faster and more destructive, but still achieving the same thing. Steam escaping from confinement as a vent in the earth. And in every case, every event partakes of two media. The interesting thing about that is that the tree is not air and it is not earth. It is wood. So the tree now becomes yet a third media and sets up conditions for yet other events to occur on, because events can only occur at the boundaries of differences between male and female. There are events that explode biologically as birth and produce more of the same. But the fact you have to have that difference for such tensions to be present. Perhaps sex is an attempt for us to become more alike. Who knows? Yes, tree, then transferring earth materials to air and air materials to earth is trying to make less difference between the media at the border of which it generates. Every event then is a release of energy to attempt to decrease differences. The world is nothing but a series of events, and every event creates yet another difference. So you see, the first event is all that is necessary. After that, all events must follow. Every event that is possible will occur once any event has occurred. So you don't have to have any real fancy theories about creation or how things got here. Once anything at all got here, the rest will get here. And you and all other things, beetles and so on, simply iterations of preceding events. We are just iterations of a particular form of mammal. It could be a human, could have been an ape, could be a chimpanzee. Got a book on the mammals the other day and said that Homo is doubtfully separated from Pongo or Pan. You know, we should call all of us Homo, all of us Pan, or all of us Pongo. But, you know, to be fair as zoologists, as we share the same blood groups with the chimpanzees, the same parasites with the chimpanzees, the same structure, the same function, we should not really cut them off zoologically from ourselves. They are iterations of the same development. You can take a beetle's form or a fern's form, put it in your computer, keep on reiterating it, and you'll generate all ferns, all forms of beetles you've never seen. Somebody once asked T.H. Huxley how he saw God. He said, I see him as a rather eccentric old man with a tremendous fondness for beetles. Because of all things that exist, beetles are the most numerous. All macrofauna that exist, beetles are the most numerous and have the most form and the most color. So God obviously liked beetles. He didn't like monkeys. All that world, he only really made about 5 great apes, of which we are one. But beetles he loved. He kept on iterating beetles. Mind you, once he had made the first beetle, they went on iterating themselves. So we don't have to look for a creator or a creation. We just have to look for an event. All else will follow. Everything else will follow. Everything possible. So you can say, what was the creation? Creation was a rupture within a media, between two forms of media. Or I think the scientists say the universe arises from a singularity. A little space-time fold or twitch, out comes the universe. And of course, it keeps on iterating. So it produces more and more complex, more and more varied forms. Now, in the universe, there's about us, however we got here it is, and within ourselves, we can only understand form. We may never understand substance. We haven't actually come yet to understanding the function of a single cell and its transactions, and its contents, and their transactions. So we have no understanding of substance. We play around with little individual bits of it, things called genes, throwing them here and there, but we really don't understand them very well. We don't understand their function very well, or how many of them it takes to function. And we can't create anything. We are not creators. We are the results of creation. You are a collection of genes and cells, each of which differentiate to become different parts of your body. Some agree to be hair, some agree to be an ear, some agree to be eyes, but they're identical cells to start with. So how are these agreements reached? How's it organized? What times its organization? And above all, what stops it organizing? And these are the great central questions, at least of zoologists, or of, say, your children. I was in the bath with my son one day, put his foot on the end of the bath and said, "Dad, what are those?" I said, "They're your toes." He said, "I know that, but why don't they get longer and longer or thicker and thicker? Why do they stop at being toes?" Here you are, holding a 4-year-old kid in the bath, staring at his foot, thinking, why did he hit on the most profound question in zoology? He asked the question, and then kids asked other profound questions. You don't listen to kids, but if you spend an hour or two listening to kids, when they're 4 or 5 or 6, they're only asking profound questions. Why is the grass green, they say? Why is the sky blue? Why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why are toes toes? They don't ask silly questions. When he was 26, I rang him up. I said, "Today, Dad," I don't ring him up very often. I said, "About those toes." Because we discovered pulses in muscle and we thought they might be what limits growth. So I told him we were advancing towards understanding toes, but we were a long way from actually giving a firm answer by giving what we had up to there. I said, "I don't remember asking the question." I said, "Well, you did, and I'll keep you filled in as we go." It might take me another 20 or 30 years. I'm not going to tell him why his toes are toes. But we're partly there. So we don't understand anything much except about form. And there we understand some things. One thing about form is it is not measurable. There's no way you can measure the area of a leaf on a tree or the length of a shoreline. So nothing in the real world is measurable because A, it's in constant change and you wouldn't finish measuring it before it changed. And B, it's the scale at which you measure it that decides its length, so it has no finite length. So nothing real is measurable. The only thing you can measure is a thing you make. And you measure it for something you make. So only things made by you can be measured, and you can only measure them for something you make. It's like interesting, isn't it? We make a ruler 1 foot long. Whose foot? Well, once we decide on whose foot, we make the ruler that long, and then we make a room 30 feet by 20 feet. We can make that, or we can say with some confidence this room is 19 feet wide, 19 foot 3 inches, really, when I look at it. And it's 32 feet 7 inches long, right? But that's only because we made the ruler and we made the room. We couldn't say what the area of leaf on that shrub is, because as we measure, leaves are unfolding, leaves are dropping, and it's only a momentary thing, its area, and we'll never get it measured in time to know what its area was when we decided to measure it. And the act of measuring it may very well also alter it. And we don't know, how much edge there is on anything. And it depends on the scale at which we measure. We can't use a foot ruler to measure the leaves. We have to make tiny little rulers, very finely divided, and the more finely divided we make them, the more area we find in the leaf. And the closer we look at the leaf, the more irregular everything is. It just looks flat. So we make a little roller wheel, it go up and down, it's irregularities, and we make an even tinier reel. We'll find that the leaf gets up to a few acres by the time we made a tiny enough ruler. I think in a teaspoonful of activated charcoal there's about 5 acres of surface. And on even a modest tree there's 40 acres of leaf surface. But really there's much more, because that's just the crude leaf surface, crudely measured in millimeters. If we get into micrometers and go inside the irregularities, the cells, then the leaf again has an enormous area. This area can all diffuse material. So trees have an enormous diffusive capacity. They're in constant interchange with the atmosphere and the earth. So let's try and summarize what was said about form to now. About the world, the universe. We don't understand anything of its substance. We understand something of its form, but we cannot measure any natural form. It's a delusion to think you can. We have a lot of people called scientists, some called hard scientists. They're absolutely full of delusion. That they can only measure an imaginary thing called a closed system. Why it's imaginary is no such system exists, not in this universe. So by artificially closing systems, by making things that measure things, and by making things they measure, they think they have hard facts. But really, they've as yet learned nothing about anything that exists. So we have a very limited grasp on reality. Down in Blanco, there was a doctor in class, and I said, your cells are made up of 2 or 3 types of material. They have membranes, and they have squishy contents, and they have little rubbery things inside like bands twisted together that are genetic material that came from probably both your parents. But it's not the same genetic material they were born with, but you know, as we keep replacing our genetic material as we grow, we build our experiences into our genes. And I said that's only a small part of the contents of the cell. There are about 20 or 30 other organs in there which purely come from your grandmother. They are bacteria, which are organelles, and they have to do with all the transactions of the cell. So, and as far as we can make out, every human being on Earth, black, white, brindle, fat and thin, have the same organelles from the same woman. So whoever she was, and I think I know her name, the Pitjantjatjara say her name is, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but they remember her, and they said she had to marry her brothers, which would be right. And of course their antiquity is great, so they probably bloody well know. I mean, she wouldn't have had anybody else like her. At the time she was born, she was the only human being. So she would have to marry her brothers. Some of her children would be human. And they would have to marry each other, and so went on. And here we are, chock-a-block full of some ancient female. So there's a little bit of trouble there with belief systems that derive the males from the females. The males are really a sort of mutated, aberrant female. They're all exactly the same to the 4th month of pregnancy. You can't tell who's what, really. But then we start to differentiate rapidly, and some of us become males. And the male then, in a female body, is a foreigner. So for every 36 males conceived, only 1 is actually maintained. So males are conceived at huge surplus of numbers and destroyed in utero. You know, the womb is a hostile place to women. If you got out of it alive, you're a lucky lad. If you got out of it as a man, you're a lucky lad, because if you're not a man by the 4th month, you're rapidly made over into a female and born, and probably become a butch lesbian. You're an XY female. You got to be quick about it, fight like hell, or you're a goner. So males are almost ephemera. If you take males per 100 females, which is the way you do it statistically, here we go, this is conception, here is birth, and we go, numbers, this is numbers, up here. And then we stay almost level with ladies for a while, and then we die. And here are ladies chugging along here. So we appear, function slightly. When the function's finished, we die. That's us. The sex, which is male, is basically one upon which we can allow environmental stresses to operate. We need very few to survive, and from them we breed. And in most tribal societies, you're not allowed to breed until you're 40, 50, some 60, 70 years of age. If you can't survive all the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, you're not fit to breed from. So breeding is very clearly separated from sexuality in all tribal groups. Screw who you wish, but we must all agree together who you have children to. That's a tribal decision. All tribes are divided into a series which we'll give here, which are totems or skins, and then they're divided in function this way. And you can only move about in these squares. So here are your totems, totemic animals or plants. They can be, kangaroo, waru, malu, onwards, iri. And then you can only marry into certain other totems. So that keeps your genetic streaming correct. And you have to have your mother's totem. Everybody's born into their mother's totem because, like the man says, it's a wise child that knows its own father, really. But you're pretty sure your mother. So you've got to take your mother's totem, and that then limits you. Having been this totem, there are only 2 or 3 others in which you can marry. Having married, you then take that totem, then there's only 2 or 3 other totems into which you can marry. It's a very sophisticated way to keep the entire genetic material present. Then you have, function groups. They're basically people who think, intellectual function, people who have good memories, people who act, a physical function, go jogging, hop up and down, ski down slopes. They don't necessarily think, usually don't. See someone jogging, you realise their brain's not necessarily in too good an order. And people who applaud. There are only 3 ways to demonstrate you're alive. You show emotion, you get into action, or you think. There are no other ways. Pardon? If you don't move, you die. Yeah, you can sit still and watch your belly button, but if no one brings you a bowl of rice in the morning, you're dead. Brekkie is essential to life. So you've got to sometimes move. So you can be of this totem and of one of these action groups. You can demonstrate life in one of these forms. So you can be a warrior of the Maru group, and you're so identified. No tribal person identifies somebody by, you ask them, who is that woman over there? And they immediately go back several generations, and I'll say, she is so-and-so's granddaughter's husband, sister's child. They'll come down through the totem. An existence you have is as a totemic product. You don't have an individual existence. No tribal person will identify another person as an individual. They'll identify them as a descent. Even the most detribalized Aborigines or Indian still won't break that rule. They will still come down to that person from their totemic group. Right. So here we are, alive in our totems, and now, by the rules of the group, only able to marry certain people. If you get through this period of physical action, which you generally can, if you go to be, 50 years old and the Zulu who got back with his head still on and his heart in one piece, you're allowed to take to father children. If you're an Aborigine, you reach 50 or 60, you're allowed to father children. Because it doesn't matter how many of these males survive to the point where they're still fertile. You don't need many of them. One for every 700 or 800 women, plenty. If you had a clean test tube, one for every 3 trillion women or something. Males are strictly unnecessary group, born in a sense to perish, eliminated at all stages of their life, and holding at roughly even numbers only for a very brief period of the total lifetime. Here there are 104 to 108 males per 100 females. But really, they're pretty constant. 4% homosexuality, which they inherited from their mothers. There's a defect in the X gene. A lot of them aren't very functional anyhow. They're not really there. There's always a deficit of male. Something known, I think, to every woman. If I were a woman that I looked about, I would despair. Despair. My God. Who amongst these would make a suitable father? Most of them make suitable children, actually. Yeah, so off you go. Off we go. The gun fodder of evolution, perishing by our thousands, which is our job. Our job is to die. Your job is to remain steady. So that's why you know everything, and we don't know much. And besides, we don't talk to each other. Well, not much to say, really. Good morning, good night. Men don't talk to each other. If you go working in the bush, you're lucky to exchange 3 sentences in a day. Ladies, for their chatting way, we're having what I call gynecological conversations. Pretty complicated, full of things totally outside anyone's understanding, and I think their own too, really. But, you know, chat. So, log data. So, the natural world is not very comprehensible, except in those abstract terms of iterations, of everything reproducing itself or like events, but not quite the same. And on it goes, displaying every sort of form. Keep on iterating, you build in all the errors, and you build in all the experiences. What they're finding in Australian geneticists are finding these days that, you know, the longer you live and the more you survive, the better your genes are. You build in all the experience of survival. So it's quite interesting. I thought, you know, the way things are tending, that we could actually be at stud after age 60, you know, adding about another $5,000 per service the older we get. And this is exactly what they did in the Himalayas. They put annual increase on your age before you could father. I think some tribes are now up to 75, 80 years of age. We're allowed to have a child. And they're all bounding around there at 80, leaping from rock to rock. My God. You've got to be fit. What are they called? Hunza. They started, I think, about 100 and something years ago to breed for longevity. It didn't matter what you eat or something, as long as you live a long time. Right? So people go around chomping on tons of food, but it ain't what keeps them alive. What keeps them alive is breeding from long-lived people. One thing common to long life, if long life's what you're about, the only people who live a long time are people who never move. They stay within a fixed area. They have that much in common, no matter what society they're in. So if you want to stick around town, you probably live longer than travelling, right? Particularly you'd live longer than flying, I tell you that. Airline food is pretty sad. Okay, so you can tell your story of creation to your children. So first of all, there's nothing. That's nothing in there. That's nothing there. And then you can make an artificial division of nothing. There's nothing above and nothing below. This is nothing above. And this is nothing below. Or I can divide the waters of the earth into those above the earth and those below the earth, whichever you like, however you want to be a creator. You can say this is left nothing and that's right nothing. As soon as you've done that, you've made a difference. Therefore, an event can occur. As soon as you make a difference, there's stress between the different parts. And an event may occur. But until there is a difference, nothing can occur. So the act of creation is to make one difference. And of course, I always envision creation as this one voice crying out in panic. Ah! Somebody panicked. Something panicked. The rest follows. You don't think somebody's sitting down there carving little beetles and letting them go iterating beetles, do you? Nope. Beetles perfectly capable of iterating itself, as indeed are we. As indeed is everything. Okay, so let us follow the event then. What is the form of any event? And what is the form of all events? And how many events can there be? We've given it a place to happen. It then needs an initiator. That can be an escape of tension as a detonation, or it can be a seed. We'll let it be a seed. Let it spiral down and settle there on the border, on this case, sort of almost a gravity-free surface, and then it starts to grow. Well, it always grows as a spiral, as you can see from looking at most things that, demonstrate growth. They always look a bit like this. They're actually a set of intersecting spirals. So out of the ground comes a spiral, and into the ground goes a spiral, and it's a tree. And this is how its branches come out along this spiral. So if you look at phyllotaxy, or the growth of leaves in order around stems, you'll find they occur in various numerical orders. If you make a little triangle, start at 1, and then add 1 plus nothing is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3. These are called summation series. And these are called the Fibonacci numbers. Fibonacci lived in a street in Florence called, unsurprisingly, Fibonacci Street. And you set up this thing. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13. On you go. 13 plus 8 is 21. 21 plus 13 is 34. On you go. Onwards and upwards. You'll find if you count this way in a pine cone, all the way, you'll come to one of these numbers. If you count this way, you'll come to another of these numbers. So everything that grows, if you count up leaves or whatever, everything that grows is part of a summation series. Now, it's not that a pine cone is a good mathematician or a seed head of a sunflower or a cauliflower. They're not very good mathematicians. And it's not that there's any reality in the numbers that they produce or that Fibonacci produces. It is that there is a coincidence between growth and summation series. But everything that grows in a summation series. How it is, so here's your event happening. We chose a tree because it demonstrates all the nature of an event, and the material of this medium, Earth, is taken by the tree and given to the atmosphere. And the material of the atmosphere and the sun is taken by the tree and given to the Earth. So the Earth donates sugar, the tree donates sugars to the Earth from the interaction of light. And itself, all plants depend on light. Only in darkness can animals flourish. Animals flourish in darkness. Plants in light. If the sun ever goes out, we'll all have to eat whales or something. There won't be any cabbages. And then the Earth yields up minerals to the tree and water. And the tree intercepts water from rain and stops some of it in the tree. But through this point of germination, through that point there where the flows material in both directions, but it also weaves at the point of germination so that all the cells carrying sugar, which lie on the outside of the trunk, that's why you screw into a sugar maple this far and you get sugar, suddenly go to the inside of the roots. So all the cells cross over at the point of germination. And on the outside of the roots, well, that's the xylem that carries the sap. Where the phloem is on the outside of the roots, and it crosses over and goes to the inside of the stems. So you see people trying to split this little block of wood here. It's hopeless. Only people who don't know about trees have seen smiting at little round blocks of wood sitting on the ground, joined up to the roots. Can't split those. They're a weave of cells. And then they spiral out of the ground. And over an enormous area, many, many acres measured at its crudest, 40 or 50 acres, they diffuse this material to the atmosphere, and again over an enormous area, they gather material, synthesize it, and donate it to the roots. So it's a constant two-way travel. Now, remember all these things. The thing spirals, that it expands in time, that it has a two-way flow, there's a crossover in the flow systems, then everything you see is of this nature. Everything you see, you are of this nature. All animals are, all plants are, all natural forms are of this nature. They have an initiator, they have an expansion phase and growth. All explosions are of this nature. a phase of decay, and they release materials from one part of the media or one different thing to another. Right. They gather from and disperse in different media. So this gathers light and sugars and energy, disperses it here, and then gathers minerals and darkness and water and disperses it here. Now you understand everything. As to the sizes these events can take, they are strictly limited. There are only about 7, at most 9 sizes of things. How many sorts of cats are there? There are only 7 or 8 sizes of cats. Why aren't there smaller or larger cats? How many sizes of branches are there in a tree? There are only really 5 or 6. Why aren't there less or more? How many sizes of sand dunes are there? There are only 5. How many sizes of rivers? How many heights of mountains? Rarely 6. How many sizes of kangaroos? 5. So everything has this form and everything's limited in size. So now you only have a few things to learn about everything. The mountains, the trees, the clouds, sand dunes, bed forms, spiral winds. There are only 5 or 6 sorts of each. Why is that? Orders of size. If we take our tree and look at the branch sizes, we find these are tiny, and they're in fixed number to the next lot. These are half as big again, twice as big again, and there are only 1/3 of them. And these twice as long again, and only 1/3 of these, each then ending in 3. Only 1/3 of them, and we're to the origin. So really what we've done, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 orders of branches. And most rivers are like this. And most glaciers and most things. Your kidneys, your lungs, your arm. 1, 2, 4, 5. Oh, finish. Why don't we have more little, shorter little things? What limited? What stopped growth? What stops growth here is that the speed of sap movement through this system slows up dramatically, so that for us to maintain a flow of sap through this trunk, we have to have a cross-sectional area of twigs up to 1,000 times larger than the trunk cross-section, or everything would come to a halt, because the traffic through the leaves of sap is so slow because it's viscous, because it's trying to force through tiny tubules a vast amount of materials coming up the trunk. And if trees branched once more, they would come to a stop. They can't get less because it's getting too viscous. So here you are, the limit is viscosity. And too sticky to go on, you know how that is. Stickiness pulls you up at times. It's British called batting on a sticky wicket. Right. And the limit here is inertia. Also viscosity will flow out. The limit here, things are so big, inertia. You can only move so much mass at once. So all forms are limited in the sizes they can occur. And all orders of branching limit are limited. So rivers rarely have 6 orders of streams. I think somebody once found a tree with 9 orders of branches. That's getting towards the ultimate limit.
So is this true of the mineral kingdom?
It's true of everything. True of everything. True of your planetary body, which are formed the same way as your mineral. There are not so many orders of size of things. Now, if you take this as where you are, and that is your ancestry, or this is your ancestry, and that's your descendant, all that is changing both ends. And as much as your ancestry and descendants have a great influence on you, you have a great influence on both of them too. Because really what you're doing is just part of a genetic streaming. So it gets a little bit mind-blinding here. And you're also living, going on living, so you are a travelling locus. You know, you're passing through time, dragging your ancestors after you and throwing more descendants further away in the future. Here you go. It's all a little bit mind-blinding. It's quite difficult to envisage something. Where is existence? Where is now? Anyhow, that's it. So you can go and play with that. It's really nice to make patterns out of it. Here we are. We'll make some. That's one of these. See? Long one. Here's a couple more, you know. Gosh, you know, you can make a lot of them. Looks like a shoulder blade. That's right. And then say we join them up or tessellate them. This is your, what's this? That's your vertebra. That's everything's vertebra. So, and they all, by the way, they all start here in the centre. Still remains the origin. So if you look at embryonic development, you see these little clumps of cells and they become your vertebra. They're all the centre of your bones. So your whole body's there, of course, there, and all your musculature is too. How can it not be? So you're made up of a whole series of events, all of which are orchestrated and stopped, thank goodness. I mean, imagine having a shoulder blade that went down to your bum. Really. Yeah. My daughter's growing her hair to the floor at present, she says. My 3-year-old daughter, that is. But Dad, I said, what? She said, I'm going to grow my hair right to the floor. First of all, to my bum and then to the floor. I said, go for it. That's easy enough to do, you know. So she's busy doing that. Okay, here we are. I like it, really. This is how you start to understand pattern. You can make little statements. The universe is nothing but a series of events. An event is a release between two differences within a media or between media. In the case of the universe, through a singularity. Every event will continue to generate other events. There will be constant iterations of that event. Everything that can happen will happen. All events are possible. After the first event, no other outside agency is needed. we're perfectly capable of generating all the events that can come from being human. We've generated most of them. We've probably got a few years more event generation to do. Right. I think humanity's drawing to a close. Possibly the chimps might escape and continue the line, but who knows, you know. You've got to be fast these days to get out of the sequence of events. Right. And why don't we have a cigarette and then I'll start on. I think you understand events. Do you or not? Oh, I might do a river for you. Why don't you have a cup of tea or come back and I'll do you a river.